So why didn't I flinch? Because the laws of science differ fundamentally from those of...
Okay, so we've all seen the shadow of the Tom and Jerry where the mouse comes into the room and he scares the cat, but the cat looks at him and realizes it's a mouse. It's normal that objects cast shadows bigger than themselves the farther the shadow is from the object that's projecting the shadow. Here's an illustration of how that works. You have a light source, you have an object, in this case a sphere, and then you have a surface on which the shadow is cast. Now, if you notice, when the object isn't right up against the surface, the shadow is bigger than the object. We've all seen this, and we can duplicate it ourselves easily. You can use a quarter, a ping pong paddle, headlights of your car, and a garage door. You see it in the real world all the time. Look at this picture here. The sun has swung around to our region. The light is being cast over the peak of this mountain, and look at the shadow. The farther away it is, the wider it gets, because that is how it works in nature. That's what's duplicatable. That's what can be demonstrated. And this is, notice that the shadow is never smaller than the object. But explain this. This is supposedly an image from space of an eclipse over Mexico. And if you look at a map, you can see that's 50 or maybe 60 miles across. Hard to say, but it's not a quarter the size of the Earth. But could the moon cast a shadow smaller than itself? Look at this illustration. If the ball is right up against the surface, the shadow is the exact same size. And if it gets farther away, the edges might become blurry, and the shadow can actually be bigger than the object, but it can't be smaller. So how can you explain that something 250,000 miles away, a quarter the size of the Earth, casts a shadow 50 miles across right there? And they could probably come up with some fantastical math to try to explain it. But even when you look at a chart that shows you where the eclipse is, look at the width of this band. I mean, look at the northwest part of it. If it went right over Salem, you couldn't even see a partial eclipse from Eugene or Portland. That's only about a 45-minute, maybe an hour drive. So that is maybe an hour and a half. But nonetheless, look at the size of the path. So when they show you this, don't you scratch your head for a minute and go, how is that possible? The shadow is the same size as the object in all scientific demonstrations. Now, when they show you one of their baloney illustrations and say, no, this is the magic. Look, the sun is so big it encompasses everything around it, and the light just kind of shoots itself up underneath the moon and makes a spot smaller than the moon. But actually, that is the exact opposite of what you really find in the real world. If the eclipse spot in this image was the light source, the shadow would be the size of the sun. It's the opposite. Look at the picture again. Light source, object, and shadow, which is bigger than the object unless the object is right up against the surface upon which it is casting the shadow. And we all know that light travels straight. If these two sticks were sundials, the light would have to be straight or your sundials would never be accurate. And yet, what they want to do is tell you that somehow, even though the sun's 93 million miles away from us and it's 92,750,000 miles away from the moon, it does this. That is a joke. This next image is from a University of Montana, and they tried to replicate what they claim happens with this model. On the right, you have the Earth, then you have the moon, then they inserted a light diffuser, and that light diffuser is between the light source and the moon. So you can see that somehow the shadow is manipulated in such a way that it looks like it's a little bit smaller in the middle, a little hazy around the edge. And this is what they tell us that eclipses do. But in the real world, where's the diffuser? There's supposedly an Earth, a moon, empty space for 93 million miles, and then a light source. This is the exact same model without the diffuser. This is what really exists: the Earth and a moon and a light source. And notice that because the moon is not right up against the earth, the shadow on the earth there is bigger than the moon. So how does that work? That means that the path of an eclipse should be way bigger than what they're showing you in the official model. But when you look at a map like this, it shows you the bandwidth of the shadow, and it is very small. Even the actual images that aren't just a map like this will show you that the spot that the sun leaves is small. This is an official photo from NASA or a satellite of the shadow of an eclipse. This is the problem though. How do you take this? You have the Earth, 8,000 miles in diameter, about a little bigger, and you have the moon, which is 2,000 miles in diameter or bigger, 31 times the diameter of the Earth toward the sun, blocking the light. And they're telling us that we get this little spot. Now we know how shadows work. All you have to do is just play around with some light and an object. We know how the model of shadows work. The farther away the shadow is projected away from the object, the bigger it gets. But they tell you, you take this, and somehow miraculously, you get this. I had an extra thought that I wanted to throw in on this eclipse shadow subject. It shows what is claimed to be a solar eclipse over Mexico City in Mexico there, and you can see that that shadow is, I don't know, 50 or 100 miles across, and the Earth is the moon is 2,000 miles wide. Whether that photo is fake or not, look at the path that the total eclipse makes across the United States. It is that size. Wouldn't this image imply that if that moon wasn't in the way and you were on the Earth, the sun would look huge, bigger than the moon? The sun never looks bigger than the moon. This image is very misleading because it would suggest that if you just deleted the moon out of that picture, the sun would look bigger than the moon does. It doesn't. Look at time-lapse photography of the sun going across the sky and then look at the moon. They're the same size from our vantage point, whether there's an eclipse occurring or not. Some troll left a comment on one of my videos. It was the solar eclipse video, and basically what they were talking about was how simple it is to see the situation if I had a brain, and that would be to just draw a line from the sun across the moon, and then from the moon, you know, on the other side also, and then I would see that, well, clearly the shadow cast by the moon would be smaller than the moon. So I started looking at that, and let me show you what it looked like to me. Tell me what you think. So look at what he said to draw that would make it so obvious. We have lines that go from the sun across the moon to the Earth. Small shadow. The problem with this is they show it on both models, incidentally. They show it on the solar and the lunar eclipses. But wouldn't this imply that the light is not parallel? If it's converging like that, that means it would eventually intersect. So let's get this straight. When science wants you to believe one thing, they'll show you intersecting light rays. But when they want you to believe something else they teach, they're only going to show you straight rays, like in this one. In the experiment that Eratosthenes did, the light had to be straight for it to work. If it wasn't straight, sundials wouldn't work. But they do, because light travels, it's radiation, it travels in a straight line. But they say, no, it actually converges and it would intersect. But every other scientific explanation about light behavior and discoveries show straight light rays. This is an excellent illustration here. Look at the light. Do they imply any convergence? Any light that would eventually intersect? Absolutely not. But they will show you anything that it takes to help you believe what they want you to believe. Whether there's truth in it or not, that's irrelevant. You have to start thinking for yourselves and look at this. Here again, the sun is depicted as having straight rays. They even showed that they're divergent in the left. They actually spread out as they radiate away from the light source. And when you look at the real world, this is how light works. Does this show any light that would converge any light that would intersect, this is what you see in the real world. Look at the clouds. You can Google sun in the clouds and you'll find tons of images like these. But when they want you to believe a certain thing, they'll show you a photo like this and say, no, this is how it works. The light will go around the moon and it will converge on the earth. And if the earth wasn't there, it would actually intersect, which means light isn't straight, which means every scientific experiment that relied on straight light rays is invalid. But what you have to remember is that the people that are controlling the world, they control the media, they control academia, they control science, they control history, and they happen to all have a flat earth logo on their agency. Well, you know, look, the flat earth map is on all their logos. They'll give you pictures from space and tell you that they're true. They'll lie to your face and say, here's some real pictures. And if you just scrutinize them a little bit, look at them yourselves. Satellite pictures, the cloud cover is frequently just pasted, sloppily even. And they'll ignore every other proof and want to argue over trivial details about the math or about you don't have this figured out. They ignore the fact that you can't find a curve. They ignore the fact that what you see with your own eyes tells you different. And they ridicule anyone who thinks out of the box and doesn't go along with the crowd and accept what they're taught. I mean, why would they, on one hand, just lie to you and say, look, light converges from its source. It doesn't radiate out. It doesn't spread out. It doesn't go in a straight line. Oh, well, wait, we want you to understand something else, so now we're going to show you that the light rays are straight and parallel. Everything they discover supposedly is more fantastical. Now we don't even have a plane of orbit. Now all the planets are chasing the sun through the universe. It doesn't matter. They're insulting your intelligence. They released this the other day and showed you a Jupiter with strudel on the top and said, wow, look what we have. What it really is that they don't want you to feel like you're anything. There is no purpose and you need them to lead you. We came from monkeys. We have no purpose. We're in a universe that's going no place, came from nothing, going nowhere, and we came from nothing and we are nothing. We're property, and they want us to feel like it. The last thing they want us to think is we came from something important, that we have value. Each person has to reconcile in their own mind what they're going to believe, but do you really need to cling to the teachings of people that are known liars? They won't tell you the truth for the life of them. Listen to these people. The people that run the world are wicked. So would you expect that they would tell you the truth about science or about history? Do you think they're going to let their schools teach you something that contradicts things that mold your thinking the direction they want you to go? They won't. So think of the bigger picture. It's not about the shape of the planet or the earth or if it's flat or if it's round. It's about the value of life. And it's about, do you value truth?